Hi and welcome back to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day. Today I am very much looking forward to summer. It's cold and dreary here in the middle of England, so I've created some dragonflies. They may not be anatomically correct. I am not a lepidopterist or whatever the person that looks at dragonflies is called. I don't know. So they may not be anatomically correct, but I think they're beautiful and they're absolutely gorgeous on fascinators, in jewellery, brooches. I've worn these as rings, but maybe that's just me. I really like them. So they're not difficult to make, slightly fiddly in places. We're working with just 2 gauges of wire, 1mm or 18 gauge, plus 0.4mm or 26 gauge for fill-in on the wings if you want to. So the beads I've chosen to use today are faceted 6mm prehnite, which is a beautiful, almost like a rutilated green quartz looking gemstone. Absolutely gorgeous. So if you join me down at the board, I'll show you slightly closer a look at the dragonflies we're looking to make today. So these are exactly the same technique for creating the overall shape. This one has got a basket weave that's very, very open, 3 wraps on either side and then just coming to a termination at the end. And then this one has got a much more closed up wrap, a basket weave, figure of 8, however you wish to know it, until you get to the end. And then I've just popped in another bead. Now I didn't have a contrasting colour to hand, but it would be lovely to have a contrasting colour. So those are the beauties that we're going to be looking to make today, and it is just 2 wires. I've got around about 16 to 18 inches of the 1mm gauge wire, onto which on one end I've added 7 of the 6mm beads. Now if you're looking to use larger beads, these look amazing sized up, you will need much more wire. These have got a reasonably good drill hole size. Obviously, as I say, we're working with 18 gauge, which is 1mm across. So you do need to check that your beads will work with your chosen wire. So I've just put a tiny little loop on the bottom end to stop the beads from escaping, and we're going to start at the other end of our piece. To begin with, I'm going to use some round nose pliers just to create a single loop to start off with. Not overly tiny, so a little bit away from the end of the pliers there, and just make that almost a complete loop. And then I'm going to come in with some bent chain nose pliers and turn very, very sharply back away from that loop. Pop the pliers either side of that and just bring that slightly closer together. And then you can fiddle with that loop a little bit later when it's easier to work with. So what we're going to do now is pop the pliers inside the loop we've created and to the other side of that little U shape, and just try and get a second similar sized loop. I'm going to withdraw the pliers, pop them back in just the new loop that we're working on, and draw that back to the central position. And that's not perfect, but you can take a little bit more time. And we're starting at the head of the wee beastie, so that those are kind of the antennae end of the beast. And I'm just going to bring those slightly closer together before gripping hold of the tail of wire that's coming away and putting quite a firm, sharp bend there. You've got almost a heart shaped at the head there. Now this next section needs to be quite straight. We're going to bring all the beads in from the far end. Now this wire's ever so slightly kinked, so that might take a second. And what we're going to do now is take a judgment. What I need to do is just make sure that the wire is reasonably straight. And I'm going to shift 5 of the beads down. And what I'm looking for here is a gap that represents approximately 3 bead sizes. So if you imagine that there are your beads, move them up, that looks around about the same size. And we want a gap there. Before we come back down to the bottom and put a right angle bend at the end of where we imagine our 7 beads need to sit, with an empty space that's around 3 beads in size. So a right angle at the bottom of your wire here. Now what we need to do is just apply a little bit of strengthening onto this base section of the wire. So you just need to move the beads out of the way one at a time. Personally, I don't like hammering when there are beads in close proximity. If you press this too hard, you won't then be able to move the beads back down. So what I'm doing is just opening and closing with some flat facing pliers, just to get a little bit of residual strength in the main body of the beast. So as you build up, you'll be adding layer upon layer of wire to this design. It will become much stronger. This is to benefit you when you first start creating the design. It just makes holding everything just a tiny bit easier. So it's a step not to skip, especially just here. And I'm going to come away maybe half the size of the bead. So it's a 6mm bead. So I'm just going to give that a press around about 3mm past that bend. So I just need to give that a really good squeeze, especially just here. So I'm going to pull the first bead back down into position. And what I might do is just trim away this end so that it doesn't catch on things and send my little dragonflies flying away when I don't want them to go. So I'm just going to change the orientation of the design so that my non-dominant hand is holding that little right angle that we just made. What I want to do now is put a little bit of heat and warmth into the first section of tail wire that we're working with. Pull the bead all the way down to the end there, and then draw that wire around and over the top. And even though we've strengthened that wire, this is probably what will happen. So we need to get the wire to go all the way around that first bead, and then we'll just have to straighten this wire up. If you work with a slightly harder wire, this doesn't tend to happen, but it is much more difficult on your fingers. So we've managed to straighten that up almost straight away. It's not a problem. So the tail end of my wire is coming around the outside of the base bead, and what I want to do is cross over the surface of our core wire, the centre of the beast, and wrap all the way around in one complete circuit, and then in a continuance, carrying on from where it left off. So just pull that down so it's a nice tight coil. So it's gone around the central wire all the way once and then continued on its way. Apply a little bit of warmth again, not too much at this stage because it's starting to firm up for you now. What we're going to do is take this tail end of wire around the outside of the bead, but this time we're going underneath the central body, like so. So that's come across underneath, and we're going to wrap again all the way around once and then on in the same orientation. If you move those beads out the way, you may be able to just tighten that up slightly. So we've got one coming on the left side, as it were, one on the right, and it's come from top to bottom. So what we're going to do now is take that from bottom all the way around over the top of the core wire, like so, all the way around the core and continuing on its way. So you can see it's come over the top, all the way around and continuing. Pull that down nice and neatly. If you want to, each step of the way, very, very gently, you can squeeze those coils to make sure that they sit flat. What you want to be able to see is either side of the wire at one time, being very, very cautious not to impact on your gemstones in any way. If you feel that this is something you're a little bit nervous about, please do wear eye protection, because if a gemstone shatters, it's not something that you want in your eye. So safety glasses, if you're working with pliers near gemstones, is probably a good idea. So back down to the board, all we're going to do is continue flipping from the top to the bottom, from the left to the right. So my wire's coming out rightwards from the top, so I want it to skirt all the way around the gemstone, underneath the core wire, all the way around the core and continuing on its way. So we're going to do that one more time until we have wrapped 5 of those beads. So from underneath on the left, all the way around. And then what we're going to do here, instead of just wrapping once, we're going to wrap another 2 times, like so. Got hold of my pliers there, sorry. So we've got a section in the centre onto which we can add our wings later. And again, please proceed with caution if you're using pliers near to your gemstones. So that's why we needed that extra space, to allow for each of the wraps between the beads and also to give us this little section to work with. So the wire's coming off to the right over the top, so it goes all the way around the outside of the bead, opposite to where you were a moment ago, around the central core wire, and then last time from the left underneath, all the way around, a complete wrap continuing on its way. So you will find that as you go, the section will start to firm up slightly. So all we need to do now is go back in the same direction. So the wire is over the top, so we take it all the way around. Sorry about the flip there. underneath, one full wrap, get that nice and tight if you can, and then just continue on your way. So we're going to do a couple of extra wraps at the midpoint. And I'm going to speed through this because it's exactly the same technique, from under to over, from left to right. So from the top here, all the way around and underneath. And then we've got just enough wire at the end left, just to curl around over the top and sit down neatly into position. So that's pretty much the same as the one I prepared just before the video now. What I'm going to show you to do now is build up the wing section. So if you'd like to join me back down at the board, we will continue with the process. So back down at the board, I've got another section of wire. This time it is around about 16 to 18 inches and it's the 1mm gauge. Now these are made with 1mm, which has made really quite sturdy wings. If you wanted to use a slightly lighter gauge, you absolutely can. But for me, I think I'd prefer to have the heavier gauge and know that it will stand the test of time. So I'm just going to give that a little bit of a smooth and a warm through. And I'm going to find the central point just here. I'm going to start on the underneath of my design, which at this stage doesn't really seem to matter. Although I do prefer to have the cut coil on top, because it means if I wear this in my hair, there are no cut sections to catch. So if we look at the underside, central section of our new length of wire, we're going to wrap that all the way around so that it crosses on the top. Ideally, find the central section, which I have failed to do, but never mind. We just need to get a really nice tight section, a tight wrap over the top there. And if you do need to coerce that, again, proceeding with caution because of your gemstones, just give that a bit of a squeeze. That needs to be really firm onto the piece in the centre. What I'm going to do now is just create some straightness coming away from the central core. And you can use any round form that you like, but I'm going to use my stepped bail makers. And I'm going to draw a circle with a recorded size, and I'm going to take the tail of the wire over the top of the beast, or the top of the centre, and I'm just going to curl that around for a second, just like so. What I need to do now is make sure I use the same size piece to create an equal and opposite wing form. So that's just going to come over the top. Now I've estimated those, and this one looks ever so slightly shorter. So the trick to getting that to move out is just to roll it out a little bit and then reform by hand. They look a little bit closer to the right size. Now the next section, if I just undo those slightly, what we're going to look for is which one of our wires started at the top. So in this wrap section, my left-hand wire is closer to the antenna segment. So that is going to be my first wire that I want to wrap around the body. So I'm just going to take that tail and push that underneath, making sure that I keep that wing shape all the same. So the left-hand wire comes out first, so it's going to wrap first. And what it's going to do is all the way over the top, all the way around the core of the dragonfly, and then push the section over and out of the way for the moment. So that's a nice firm shape that's going nowhere. And then just repeat on the other side. So one wing is going to be slightly higher than the other, but this is just the way I make my dragonflies and I really like them. So I'm going to lay the right hand returned wire over the top and try and snuggle that as much as I can around that central bead that we're working with, all the way over the top and off in the opposite direction. Now you can see that I didn't centralise my wires very much, so I'm just going to trim away on this side so that they're the same kind of size. And all you need to do is just pop a little coil on it if you want to. If you need to make sure that those are the same length, then you can just pop a rule in. And I'm just going to cut that to 2 inches, which is probably a reasonably good size to make quite an elaborate coil. So 2 inches away from the end. Just trimming that away, get the ruler back out of the way, and we're just going to do some open coils, quite large size, like so, all the way around until I've got my first complete coil. Same on the other side. It's funny, it looks bigger on this side, but I think they're the same. And then returning with some flat facing pliers just to tidy that up, keep it into true. And then I just like to do an open coil. If you want to do a second set of wings, which is probably more anatomically correct, then that is of course something that you can do. But what I've wanted to do is make something that is beginner friendly and that actually builds up reasonably quickly. So I mean, you could make really elaborate swallowtail style lower wings if you wanted to have a butterfly rather than a dragonfly. I'm just going to repeat the coiling on this side. So an open coil rather than completely closed up. I think it's really pretty. You can do whatever you fancy. You could even put little gemstones on the end if you want to. And then just try and get those to sit equal and opposite. So the two dragonflies that I have on the desk at the moment are samples of how you can infill and add detail to the wings. It is very simply a case of basket weaving, which I've shown you no end of times with the bales that I've made over the years. So rather than demonstrating that for you, I'm just going to very, very briefly talk you through that process. So back down at the board, you've got your wings ready to go. All I would do with this one is start off with really quite a long cut piece of 0.4 or 26 gauge wire, and I'd wrap 4 times or 3 times on one side and then back and forth. If you start over the top and come underneath, then you just go back like a figure of 8 over and over. You could even do a 1-for-1 and end up with almost a sheet, almost a metallic sheet if you prefer. And then just to finish off, all you would do once you've filled in those wings is just add a little bit of dynamism, that's the word I was searching for. A little bit of shaping just by elevating those wings. You can move those around to your heart's content. But that is the basics of a beginner-friendly dragonfly in wire and gemstone. Of course, you can use whatever beads you want, but I think gemstones, they so are reminiscent of dragonflies in the jewel colours that they display in the summer months coming into autumn, which I'm really looking forward to, I'm going to be honest. Anyway, it's been a delight to have you back here on the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Bye for now.